The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a few minutes before the hour, but we are planning to start our webinar at 4 o'clock on the dot. We will be recording the session that will begin more or less immediately. And we'll keep most folks on mute until a little bit later, and we'll have an announcement or two as we begin the session. For now, just stand by. Thanks for joining us, and we'll officially start in the next couple of minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Jana Martella. I am going to be manning the slides this afternoon. We wanted you to know that actually, because we're not going to be a huge group, we are welcoming any of you to dial in and use the panelist access code and go to webinar with more than 25 folks, which we will expect to have. Everyone comes in muted, but we'd like to open the lines a little bit later for Q&A. So if you can remain logged in, but if you can dial in using the dial-in number and the access code that you see on the screen, we would encourage you to do so, and we'll show this slide periodically throughout the webinar. There are a few logistics that we want to make you aware of as folks are coming on board. As I mentioned, we encourage all participants to dial in using your phone line and then the access code that you see on the screen. We know that some of you won't want to hang up or won't want to log off and redial in. So, of course, questions and comments can always be entered in the chat box at any time, and we will be monitoring the chat box as the webinar continues. We are recording the session already, and it will be posted on our website. It really is our opportunity to give you a glimpse into year 6 and year 7 at CEELO, which we're pretty thrilled about. We're also down by a few staff members currently, so if you do have any technical issues, you can email me at the email that you see there, Jana Martella, or you can text using that number. Or if you're having any difficulties, technical difficulties, again, feel free to enter them in the chat to any one of the organizers on the session, and we can go from there. I'm going to hand off to Lori to do all of the introductions today. Welcome all of you that are aboard and looking forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Jana. Thank you for joining us and spending a little time with us today. We know we've been working with you for the past 5 years, and we wanted to share a little bit about what our priorities are for the upcoming 2 years, 2018 and into 2019. So welcome to everyone. We will go over our technical assistance priorities for 2018 and 19. We will share with you some selected tools and resources. So we've been quite pleased to develop a couple of toolkits that anybody can access on very key areas, and then we use those toolkits to provide deeper technical assistance, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Most importantly, we know you learn best and hear best from your own colleagues, so we are very grateful to have representatives from different states that we've worked with on technical assistance talking about their experience with tools and the technical assistance we provided. That might give you some ideas about ways you might want to engage with CEELO. We would like to hear from you, so please do share at any time in the chat box your goals and your TA needs. And we look forward to, again, opening that up and having a discussion a little bit later as we move through the webinar. Okay, Jana, we can go to the next slide. So as you know, our name is the Center on Enhancing Early Learning Outcomes. We're always quite pleased when we go to even different groups. I've had some chances to go out to talk to legislatures and other folks, and they've actually heard of CEELO. So we take pretty seriously our name, which is to focus on enhancing early learning outcomes. However, we know that we can't really do that without you and many other folks in the field. Our partners are the National Institute for Early Education Research, of which I work for, the Council of Chief State School Officers, notably represented by Rolf Grafwallner and his staff, of which CCSSO has made for all chiefs, and the chiefs is committed to early childhood education as one of their 10 priorities. And Jana ably represents EDC. They have quite a bit of work that they do on technical assistance and research across the country. Diane Schilder is on the call as well, and she's one of the EDC staff. Our mission is to strengthen the capacity of state education agencies and their partners, and that means other state agencies like in Georgia or Washington and Connecticut, other state agencies such as, I noticed someone from Indiana had registered anyway, from the Child Care Lead Agency. We work in partnership with all those that care about young children, birth through 3rd grade, to improve their opportunities to reach their goals and be successful. We are funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, actually the Office of School Support and Rural Programs within that. And we're part of a comprehensive center network working in partnership with our regional center colleagues, some of whom are on the call, as well as other content centers. So that's just to say we are able to draw from a plethora of expertise and resources and people that are across the country to meet your needs. Next slide, please. We thought we'd show you the faces of the CEELO team. Hopefully these folks are familiar to you. Steve Barnett is our PI at NEAR. As I mentioned, Rolf Grafwallner from CCSSO, Ellen Freedy, who was formerly in the New Jersey Department of Education at the Gates Foundation and at Acelero, has a long career, is now co-director at NEAR and part of our team. Jim Squires, Diane Schilder, Gigi Weisenfeld, formerly in Hawaii, now in San Diego. Michelle Roos really guides us around communications and helps us have sharper messages. Hopefully you've enjoyed our new Impact newsletter. Tracy Jose is newest to our team, working really as a senior policy advisor on a part-time basis, but making a big impact, bringing her experience both as an owner of a child care center and working in Maryland State Department of Education to our work. We hope we are able to meet your needs as we move forward. Okay, Jana. This is the number, I think, Jana, you want me to, so if you would like to call in and be able to just chat with us, feel free to use that.
That's right, Lori. And you don't have to log off if you're already logged in and want to continue listening through your computer. But if you do have questions as we go along, please feel free to insert them in the chat box. Or if you've dialed in, you can dial in again using the same number and use a different access code. So as Lori mentioned, we are moving our center operated under a 5-year cooperative agreement, and we have been given an additional 2 years of spending authority, of operating authority, and have received our funding for year 6. And that's what we're here to talk to you about. In general, our overall objectives are still the same, helping state folks to manage and maneuver through the landscape of early childhood work. We have kind of narrowed down to 3 major areas of focus that we have found to be extremely important over the course of the last 3 years. And you can see them here, and we will talk about them in a little bit greater detail, and also point you to our website in a minute so you can see some of the more in-depth tools that are in the works or have been developed over the course of the last several months. One thing to point out, actually, Rolf and our partners at CCSSO are in a home week retreat. So Rolf has not joined us today, but Lori will go over a number of the projects that we do in coordination and collaboration with CCSSO. And Jim Squires is also with NEAR. Many of you, in fact, I would guess most of you know Jim, and he is reducing gloriously his time a little bit, trying to head toward retirement, but we have our hands firmly planted around his ankles and won't let him go entirely. And in a minute, we'll be talking about some of the leadership work that he has provided for us. Let me move on in this. As states are developing their strategic initiatives on early learning, they are aligned with some of the other strategic efforts that they have underway. So we have done a lot of work over the last year, Lori and Rolf in particular, on the ESSA state plans, which Lori will talk a little bit about. But states are also engaged, excuse me, I didn't mean to forward there, are engaged in their own strategic planning. And we have worked over the course of the last several years helping states make certain that early learning frameworks are a component of their strategic efforts within their state education agencies and their early learning agencies as well. Included in that, of course, the state early childhood advisory councils, the SACs, or the ESACs, as they're often called in the states, as well as the Child Care Development Fund and the SIP state plans for the OSAP programs for young children. All of these kind of need to work as a cog together around the 3 strategic priorities for CEELO in the coming year. We have found that among the most important components of making those cogs work together is leadership and leadership capacity. So over the course of the last 5 years, actually in our first year and a half, we were doing some major planning and research around leadership work within the states, leadership in districts as well, leadership writ large, which resulted in a flagship program for us, the Leadership Academy, and we ran 3 very intensive cohorts within that Leadership Academy. We are very hopeful that we will launch cohort 4 in the coming year in 2018. And in addition, there's a lot of learning from that Leadership Academy, which we'll talk about when we give you a bit of a glimpse of some new tools coming online from that Leadership Academy and the expertise of our staff, along with a number of consultants that have been working with us in the states. we have a new leadership capacity building toolkit and have developed a mentor learning community among state staffing that are 2 years new to their roles within their state education agency. And then in 18, we will be launching into some strategic work with specific offices of early learning throughout the country, building out their collective capacity for meeting the policy needs and affecting impact for young children. So handing off to the P3 curriculum area, Lori, you can take it from here. And you might be on mute, Lori.
Yes, you are right. Good thing we're partners. So as you can see, we've chosen, or you will see, 3 kind of core levers that we think will best utilize our expertise, meet your needs, and help us move towards our goal around enhancing outcomes for children. So with that, we know we have to improve programs and the quality of instruction. So again, as I mentioned, we developed a toolkit. It's called the Birth to Grade 3 Indicator Toolkit. It does outline, in partnership with CCSSO, it outlines the framework of ESSA in terms of school improvement, in terms of setting goals for young children, public data and reporting and accountability systems, and identifies a set of indicators. Because we all know that what we value, we hope we can measure, but in young children and in those early grades, it's often very difficult to find valid, reliable, and appropriate measures. So Elliot actually was part of this technical work group, has written quite a bit on this. The framework gives you opportunities to try to take a look at a set of different indicators that would look at both academics, but also access and engagement, and he'll speak about that in a bit more. So that toolkit then is available to be used by other states, and in particular, as we identify, customized to the needs of your state. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. We're also really trying to put a spotlight on K-3. That's really often a black hole in what we know about how children are learning, at least at the state aggregate level, until if you have a KEA and you're able to report on their kindergarten entry status, and then if you are then assessing children at 3rd grade or in sometimes 2nd grade. But those in-between years and what happens to ensure children stay on the right path and do not get too far behind is an area we're focusing on in partnership with Education Commission of the States. We're working with Massachusetts, Colorado, Mississippi, and Arizona on policies to improve practice in kindergarten through 3rd grade. What we learn in any of these buckets, if you will, or spheres, we hope to share with everybody so that this will, I guess, inform your work as well. We can go to the next slide, Jana. So we're doing, we believe strongly that it's very important to have research, evidence-based policy, but that we really need to look at the cost and financing. I mean, for more than the 30 years that I've been in the field, that's always been our struggle, and I know many of you struggle with that as well. Fundamentally, we do not have enough resources to implement the levels of quality that we want for all children. So we're really focusing on a number of different tools, technical assistance, and materials to help you communicate the value of high quality, not only pre-K, but early learning programs. So we do have the cost of preschool quality and revenue that will be coming out with our 3.0 version very shortly. Many of you saw the cost of communicating toolkit. We're engaging in sustainability planning, and we have a sustainability self-assessment tool that we're just beginning to use with one state. We'll be sharing that with all in a little bit. We're providing intensive technical assistance, and the Kentucky folks will speak about that in a minute, so I won't say too much about that, but we are working with a number of states, including New Mexico, Washington, Kentucky, Oregon, and New York, as well as some communities around identifying the true costs of high-quality pre-K, including what it costs at a state or district level or community collaborative level to both support high-quality programs, support families in those programs. In the spring, we'll be hosting a think tank to identify what we've learned and where we need to go, what else we need to learn, and what other tools and resources we need to support this very important work.
So
All right, Jana?
Sure. Within our work, you can see from our original kind of mission and overarching goals, we really haven't changed those specifically, but we have intensified the focus in these three areas, as Lori has described. We have some cross-cutting projects. Most of you are very familiar with these. We will be hosting our annual roundtable. It will take shape, and Lauren will be talking about that in a bit as the program chair. But hopefully all will place it on their calendars for June 6th through 8th. That's Wednesday through Friday in Austin, Texas this year. We're all really excited to go to Austin. Among our other kind of cross-cutting projects, an early childhood legacy project, which I'll hand off to Lori on. Lori, you may.
Hello. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, gives me a sec to do the muting. We're really excited about a new project that we were funded by some private funders, actually, to support our CEELO work. And that's actually to reach out to you all as state early childhood administrators to identify what are the key priorities and needs that we need to put in place now for a future legacy for young children. There are actually a number of national commissions, certainly Transforming the Workforce, Power to the Profession, and others that are being led by national organizations. And we always have believed that the power comes from, and the important perspective comes from those in state agencies that are actually implementing policy, translating what legislators and governors and other folks are identifying as important priorities to the needs of specific communities and children and families. We'll be saying more about that project in 2018. We're, to be honest, waiting for a final piece of funding. But the intention of this project is to go out to the field, use a human-centered design process that could capture your needs, your stories, your experiences, your perspective on policy priorities and policy implementation to create a legacy for young children as we move forward into the next couple of decades, and in particular to a big new kind of opportunity with a new slate of governors. I think there's 33 or 36 new governors, and thus the changes in administration in states. So that's the project that is called Early Childhood Legacy. More to come as that gets finalized in the new year.
So we also wanted to talk a little bit about our responsive technical assistance. This is more intensive work that we do with individual states. There are some individual states aboard here, and you'll also hear from some states where we have conducted this deeper work. We found in the first 5 years that maybe half of our work had to do with responding to inquiries as well as requests from the field. We will not say no to those requests, but we actually hope to dive a little deeper with the states and also get up on the balcony and do some strategic work with them, engaging and deploying some of the tools that we've just talked about, particularly the financing sets of tools that have been developed. And we also know increasing the leadership capacity and the organizational capacity in offices of early learning is essential to meet the state's strategic objectives. So we will be working with our regional centers, along with other partners that you're going to hear from. But we hope to intensify the responsive work that we do and go a little deeper. So we will be negotiating with states that make inquiries relative to that and make sure that we align that work with the strategic effort that we're putting forth, like those tools that Lori already described from CCSSO and from the SCAS. So, Lori, I'll let you take that bullet away.
Sure. As we mentioned, Rolf really wanted to be on the call, but CCSSO, one, has a strong priority on early childhood and school readiness and school success through third grade. Rolf's a fantastic partner and his staff, so we support each other. He has a number of projects, the State Collaborative on Standards and Assessment, some of you are involved in, KEA Action Network, others. So we just work. And what I think the point here is that we will play with anyone who has an aligned mission, who's doing work in states. We know sometimes you have a lot of folks working with you, and we want to make sure that we streamline our technical assistance and leverage our expertise.
So
I think we're ready. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
Go
so
ahead.
I don't want to spend very much time on this because I think the most important part of today's discussion are with the state folks that we've worked with. And it's pretty easy to point you guys to our website and to point out some of the new tools that we have coming aboard, and also to point out some things to you. One, remember that we do have a quarterly, a little more frequent than quarterly, a bi-monthly newsletter that you can sign up for right in the footer of our website. And also to let you know that all of the tools that we have been describing are available in the drop-down menu under CEELO TA. I do want to highlight for you, and I'm not going to take you to our ESSA page, but I would urge you to go to it because that is where you'll see the B3 indicators report, and you'll be able to kind of do some exploration there. Lori, I'm going to let you proceed.
Oh, sorry, Jana. That's a horrible feeling. But I know we've all been there. So we are really excited again and very grateful for folks that have taken time out of their busy day. I'm going to have Elliot lead off in a minute. Elliot Regenstein, many of you know, he leads the Ounce of Prevention in Illinois' national policy work. He was a part of our technical advisory group on the birth to grade 3 indicator framework and had the opportunity to chair a P2 indicator work group that was charged with recommending to the Illinois State Board of Education a set of indicators that could place more weight on the P2 years in Illinois' accountability formula. And their Every Student Succeeds Act state plan, they proposed that they would explore that. So Elliot followed up with us, and we worked with him over the last number of months, and I'm going to turn it over to Elliot to share his experiences, why he did it, and what was the impact. Elliot?
Sure. Yes, thank you. And thanks so much, Lori and Jana, both for this opportunity to report on the help we got and for the help that we got. And I should say the Ounce of Prevention is a public-private partnership that works very closely with state agencies. So we, and the Illinois State Board of Education ran a very thorough and inclusive process in developing its ESSA plan. And as part of that, the Illinois Early Learning Council had work groups putting together recommendations for ISB. And one of the recommendations that was made was that the accountability formula should include some weight on the years prior to third grade, because the formula historically has had only the third grade and up years represented, and our feeling was that that was pulling resources and attention away from the developmentally important years before that, and that even if it wasn't going to be a huge number, that at least some symbolic recognition of that would be valuable. In the course of the Early Learning Council's process, we had deadlines we had to meet, and we sort of ran out of time to come up with specific recommendations. So we asked the state board to include essentially a placeholder and create a work group to develop what the specific indicators would be. The Early Learning Council's recommendation, I should say, was also picked up by the state's P20 Council and then adopted by ISB. And ISB then followed our recommendation and created a work group to develop indicators and asked me to chair it, which was, of course, a great honor. So having worked on the toolkit, I knew that that was a great resource, and it actually came out right as we were getting our work started. The way our work group went, and it was a really good work group with representation from the early learning community, from various parts of the K-12 community, we started by having a conversation about what is it we value in K2 education, right? What are the things that are important to us, leaving aside whether it's a good indicator or not, but just we thought, whatever this indicator is should reflect things that matter to us. So let's start with what matters to us. And we developed a list of about 17 items, or sort of 17 ideas, some of which were big, some of which were small, but all of which we thought, okay, these are things that we collectively value in K2 education. It was at that point that the CEELO resources really kicked in. We started with our list of 17 and had a first conversation where we thought, okay, which of these are serious contenders to fit our criteria, recognizing that ESSA has relatively defined criteria for what exactly can and cannot go in the formula. And based on previous conversations we had had, or the previous conversations the state had had, or strong feelings of people at the table who were able to persuade others, we pretty quickly eliminated about 10 of them and said, these are not going to be part of our recommendation. But that left us with about 6 or 7 that were. And we reached out to CEELO and said, look, like, we're going to have in-depth conversations about each of these topics, and it would be really helpful to build on what was already in the toolkit with some more detailed recommendations of how to go about this based on our specific context. And CEELO then was able to provide us with a steady stream of these briefing papers, and we did parcel it out because it was sort of a lot to digest at once. And what those briefing papers allowed the group to do was have some really constructive and thoughtful conversations about some very difficult topics, where we started with the presumption that these are things we value, but for purposes of putting something in an accountability formula, that's not enough. And the CEELO briefing papers were incredibly useful to being able to help us focus on, okay, does this really go in the formula or not? And what ended up happening was we're now, we had what I hope was our final meeting yesterday, and we're down to our final 1 or 2 indicators that we're going to recommend. But what it also helped us to do was take the things that we did not recommend for inclusion and suggest some follow-up steps. So in some cases, we've recommended that these values be reflected on data dashboards, or that they be included in the school improvement process under ESSA, or that they be revisited in a couple of years, or there's a work group, some new work group be formed to delve deeper into them. Because again, these are things we value, and so even if they don't fit in the formula, we want to make sure that there's more we can do with them. And so we have not yet presented our recommendations to the state board. We'll be doing that in January. And the report that we produce will be a public document, which of course we'll be happy to share with everybody to the extent anyone's interested. So, and we also, I would say, in addition to any other lessons we learned, one lesson we learned is that the state of measurement in K2 is not where we hope it will be. There are a lot of great measurements that are appropriate for teacher level and school level conversations, but to inform policy level conversations, there's not enough, I think, would be our conclusion. And again, the CEELO toolkit was really helpful to us in reaching that conclusion. So that's pretty much where we are in the process, and I'll stop there, knowing that hopefully we'll have some time for questions and conversation if people are interested in learning more.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Elliot. I'll leave the questions and any comments and discussion to our discussion time so folks can hear from everybody. Really pleased to introduce to you now our colleagues and partners in Kentucky. Linda Hampton, who is the Executive Director of the Kentucky Governor's Office of Early Childhood. She used to work on Kids Now and other early childhood initiatives. She is joined by Sally Shepard, the manager of the School Readiness Branch, Division of Program Standards in the Kentucky Department of Education. They both worked and were key informants and I think key drivers of work with the Pritchard Committee on producing a cost of not only preschool quality, they looked also at childcare costs as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda and Sally to talk a little bit about the work using the cost of quality tool in Kentucky.
Hi, Lori. This is Linda. Thank you so much for having us. And Sally and I will be presenting the information together. So again, as Lori had mentioned, the project that occurred within Kentucky, it was spearheaded by the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence. And the ask that had come from many child care providers and public preschool and Head Start programs within our state is, do folks really truly know how much quality is? Those of us who work closely with it within the early childhood world, we do understand that the cost of quality is extremely expensive if it is done right. So what we loved about this, and with Pritchard asking of us to be a part of this work, was to really educate folks on what the costs are as it is associated with quality. So with the Pritchard Committee, they did put together a Kentucky Early Childhood Cost of Quality Advisory Group with other stakeholders and partners. So from the state agencies, we had the Child Care Director from the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. We also had a couple of superintendents whom were a part of this work, along with the Associate Commissioner from the Department of Education. We had a senator who is a part of this work as well, Senator Danny Carroll. And what is unique to his role as a senator is not only is he a senator within Kentucky, but he's actually a senator whom in his life is a business owner. So he is a child care provider, and he also serves on our Early Childhood Advisory Council. We also had members whom are directors throughout the state as well. And then, of course, Sally Shepard, whom is my fellow colleague who was on the phone. So with that cross mix of folks that we had, people were able to share their information as to what all goes into quality. So what was great in regards to working with CEELO and with the tool that they had developed on the cost of quality was putting those factors in there, such as transportation costs, such as therapeutic services costs, such as food service delivery cost. And we were able to provide that in both the public preschool program and then also the child care program as well, because as all of you know, the costs are very different. The associated cost in operating early childhood programs in both the child care setting, a Head Start setting, and then a public preschool setting, those worlds are very different. So CEELO was able to help wrap our conversation, take the information that we were sharing with them, and put it into their tool, and basically share the information via spreadsheets with us and help us understand what the cost was. And some of the assumptions, there were key assumptions that were incorporated in there, are that the group sizes alone were very, very different. So the group sizes compared to a public preschool versus a child care operation, very different. And along with that, folks didn't understand that because you may have up to 20 children in a public preschool setting and up to 20 children in a child care setting, the costs are different. And the factors that incorporated within that are the federal monies, for example, that are coming to a public preschool program, and then limited dollars that are being fed through a child care assistance program that are going into the child care programs. So we were able to look at the wages of staff as we were going through this work, which there were monetary differences within those as well. And then also too, wanted to look at the different levels, meaning the different levels of the degreed personnel, meaning the different levels of a classroom size, especially as it pertained to age groups. So and like your infant toddler world, very, very different than your preschool world. And then Sally, would you like to chime in on other information that we discovered through this work?
One of the really good things about the tool that we found is that you can manipulate it very easily. So as Linda was talking about some of the things that were included, you can actually go in and manipulate all of those class sizes and the teacher certification, all of those things to get the most bang for your buck. So you can actually change things within the tool to match what you think is going to get you higher quality in your program. Linda, I think you covered really everything else.
Sally, could you make just say a sentence or two about how you're using that data?
So right now we're still looking at it on a state level to look at. So for example, some of our programs, many of our preschool classrooms in the past have had a teacher and 2 assistants. Well, because of just, logistically, the cost of that personnel, many of our schools have dropped down to a teacher and 1 assistant, and many times having what they call floaters. So looking at how perhaps if you're in a large district and you have an AM and a PM classroom, so you have half-day sessions, what can you do to go to a full-day session? So how can you move your monies around? Because let's face it, a lot of times our money doesn't necessarily increase, but how can you use the money that you have now to perhaps make a full-day session happen? So looking at transportation costs, which in Kentucky is for some districts astronomical because a lot of our districts are so rural, that the area of the district is huge, but the population is very sparse throughout. Also is looking at how perhaps you can partner. So looking at that tool right now, really how we best as a state can help districts use that tool, and also how we as a state can use that tool to look at perhaps changing policy or looking at different ways to support districts overall using the tool. So really we've just kind of got our hands on that final tool, that final draft of that tool. So understanding and looking at how and what we can do with that right now.
That's great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate that. I was just wanted you to be in your voice about how you are using that tool, and we will be working and supporting you all to ensure you have the capacity to, use the tool on an ongoing basis. So Jenna, you can move this slide now, and I'd like to introduce Melody Hobson, who is the administrator of the Office of Early Childhood in the Nebraska Department of Education, and Melody oversees 22 staff in 2 locations, with responsibility for children birth through age 12, including funding, oversight, and guidance to programs for children birth through age 5, technical assistance to schools serving children in kindergarten through 3rd grade, training for child care providers of children birth through age 12, and a myriad of other kinds of responsibilities. And Melody had one of her staff, Christine Luby, in our Leadership Academy, and I think partly as a result of that experience for Christine, and in talking talking with Melody, she felt she wanted to do a bit of a refresh on their own strategic planning, examining some of the core questions about what they were doing, how well they were doing it, and what's the best way to move forward. So I'd like to turn it over to Melody now. Thank you so much. If you'd share a little bit about your experience with our technical assistance this past number of months.
Sure. Like Lori said, we do have a relatively, for early childhood, a relatively large team, certainly the largest we've ever had. And within the past 5 or 6 years, our work has really doubled or tripled because of some legislation that has been enacted in the state. We have now a quality rating improvement system in which this team is very intimately involved. We do all of the quality work for the Step Up to Quality, is what we call it, program. But we also have had a lot of retirements in the past few years, and so we have a lot of new staff who's never gone through strategic planning. And in our larger organization, in NDE, we're a little bit of an anomaly in that most everything else is focused K-12. And people talk about the differences of, high school to elementary school, and we say, you ain't seen nothing yet. But so sometimes our staff are having a little bit of trouble trying to figure in where do we fit within our department strategic planning, and then our State Board of Education is visioning and doing a strategic plan for the next 10 years. And so sometimes our staff are having difficulty kind of seeing, okay, where does this put us? And so CEELO has done a really nice job, and Lori in particular has done a really nice job with us in kind of helping us clarify what our goals are, what we need to be doing, where does this fit within the strategic planning work, and how do we work with each other? Because while everybody gets along really, really well, and each person has their own area of expertise, being 50 miles apart is sometimes a challenge. And so Lori was really able to help us think through and bring some facilitated work and some resources to us about what we might think of for models maybe from other states, and how we might look at going about the planning and being that outside focus, and then helping us to really hone in what our questions are, and how to frame our own work, and to clarify our own goals, and then helping us with organizing of our internal processes. And what we're in the middle of this process, we've done a lot of work so far. We have timelines and very specific goals. And one of the big benefits that I have seen is we have the buy-in of every single staff person, and they have been able to see how much they are a part of building what's coming next for the team. And our next steps actually are then looking outward at how do we embody the values and the mission that we find very, very important. Early childhood people don't seem to lack passion, and so we're all very excited about it. But how is it that we put that into action with our partners within the Department of Education? And then, because we are so intricately involved with Health and Human Services in the child care licensing and the subsidy branches, and then also with local entities and other outside foundations and public-private partnerships. So we've gotten a lot of resources, and then a lot of good facilitation and work to help us reframe what we're doing and help us really focus pretty consistently on where is it that we want to go and how do we want to get there. So we're about 2/3 of the way done, and I do see quite a difference I see everybody who understands their place in this now.
Thanks so much, Melody. And I just wanted to make one point, is that we're really working internally first before we go externally. And I think that that's an area that we've learned in our leadership work, actually, that's often not attended to as well. So it's been actually really gratifying. I've been able to be out there a couple times as well. So let me turn this now to Lauren Zabinski, someone that we've known now for a few years. She actually was a former CEELO Leadership Fellow. She is at the Arizona Department of Education, and through my knowing of her, she's gotten a couple of promotions. She's now the Director of Professional Development and Sustainability, and she's actually gotten 2 degrees. She completed her PhD and her JD. And most recently, she's continued her leadership path and was recently elected to the Vice President of the National Association of Early Childhood Specialists and State Department of Education. And she is the program chair for our annual roundtable together with Jana, who will lead on our side to develop the annual roundtable. So Lauren, can you share a little bit about your hopes for the annual meeting and ways that people can get engaged with the planning and the attendance at that meeting?
Great. Thank you so much for that. And good afternoon, everybody. So forgive me because as it is this time of the year, we are still in very infancy stage of our planning, but we are very excited for the direction that we have kind of narrowed in on in taking it for the roundtable this year. In answering to the positive remarks and comments from last year, we know that we are going to continue with the cohort approach. Our members and participants very much appreciated the opportunity to be able to engage and collaborate with other members in such a close proximity throughout the roundtable. So we're going to continue to offer that type of approach and engagement. But this year, in talking with some of the other committees, in particular the policy committee, this question kind of came up of, well, we often as state specialists and state leaders, we are delivered the content and delivered the research and information and even toolkits, but then we come back to the real world in our own states and we get caught in this, how do I utilize all of these great resources that I just gained connections to? How do I utilize that here in my role? And in the communications that I have with others, whether they are partners or policymakers or those that we need to transition into supporting early childhood. So the idea for the roundtable is, in essence, to try and bridge that gap, to take this idea of building the content and knowledge, this research and policy into practice. And as state specialists, this ability to really have that communication and have those kind of academic quarrels and be able to inform those academic quarrels and communications. We'll do so by looking at the policy committee and that survey that they sent out a few months ago where they asked what were some of those major topics that you're seeing and major issues that you're seeing within your state. Answers such as the third grade retention, ESSA, workforce, the preparation of principals, and then that power to the profession. And so taking those kind of key concepts, and those in essence are our umbrella topics, and participants will be able to, as they register for the roundtable, they'll be able to identify which of those topics maybe is most in need for their state or for them as an individual, and that will create and identify the track or the cohort that they join throughout the roundtable. They'll receive information, that research, that policy, and then have opportunities to dialogue with other state specialists of ways that they can implement that into practice and kind of, as an essence, leave the roundtable with ideas and connections to other state specialists to continue to support and further their work as they leave the roundtable. Also, we'll be very intentional trying to provide pre-work before the roundtable, information through organizations such as NEAR or CCSSO, and helping to prep with some of that research so that everyone can come to the roundtable just ready to go and already be making those connections between all of these partnerships.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So Jen, I think we'll move to the next slide. We'd love to hear if you have any questions or comments, reflections with our state partners, or even if you have any state partners among yourselves. We'd love to hear from you. I think the lines are open now, or you can, I don't see anything in the chat box, but we'll have a moment of silence while we see if anybody would like to engage in some questions or discussion.
Yeah, particularly if you have some questions of Elliot, Linda, Sally, Melody, and Lauren. I'm very intrigued with the idea. We've given some resources. Each of the speakers kind of had an on-ramp to their topic area with a tool or a product that CEELO may have created in collaboration with them. And that's the most important thing, that we know that states learn from each other, and we want to give multiple ways of kind of onboarding to the work and then hold hands together to deepen the effort. So any questions for our state folks? And then we'll move on in the remaining few minutes to give you some additional on-ramps to some of the information. I don't know how many people, Lori, are actually have dialed in, but if folks would like to just kind of shout out if they are dialed in, if they have questions. Otherwise, enter any questions in the chat box. I know one question was posed in the, or several actually, in the Q&A box, and Diane has been answering those for us. So one question that was posed is how can folks identify who they should contact at CEELO? And I'm going to open our webpage again. I didn't give you the tour there, but as you look at state information, you can see who your state early learning leads are and who under the state information, who has responsibility state by state for each of the regional centers and your states. And you can email us right from that page. And Diane, you had a couple other questions. Do you want to, are you available to shout those out? So a couple other questions related to state, to who to contact in the state. Anyone, there is an on-ramp, anyone from the state education agency can contact your CEELO lead. It does not have to be necessarily the office head. Anyone can contact us. And if you'd like additional information on who to contact, why don't you go ahead and enter that in the chat box and we'll help you out after.
We can go ahead and move to the next slide, I think, Jana. We're getting close to the end. So what we want to do is please do reach out to us at any time. You'll be getting the PowerPoint slides and all these resources as well. We hope this has whet your interest in using the tools. We're happy to talk through how you might need to adapt them for your specific situation. If you'd like to talk to any of the folks that joined us today from the states, peer-to-peer, I'm sure they would be happy to do so. We really do thank you for your time. We know everybody is very, very busy. And we hope that this has been informative to you. As we say here, please do let us hear from you at any time. So I'll turn it to Jana to close the webinar and say thank you to everybody.
Yes, sure. So the webinar recording will be posted along with all the resources that Lori very ably entered into the chat box. You may have noticed that each of the state folks had a hyperlink next to them. That was their kind of on-ramp, in addition to the strategic planning effort and the state-based planning that you saw for Kentucky and also Nebraska. So all of these resources will be posted and will hopefully give you a little GPS for how to make your way through and maneuver your way through our website. And particularly stay tuned as some of the leadership tools come on board. I think they'll be very useful. There also will be some self-assessment tools that will tell you where to start on the map that go along with both the individual leadership tool and the toolkit, the collective leadership toolkits. And there will be additional resources emerging in the next couple of months. The most important thing, though, is that you contact us with any questions that you have. So we thank you for your time. We know state folks are really, really busy. Thank you to our partners in the states who address some of the issues that they've been struggling with and some of the answers they found. We know, and that's why we encourage you to join us in Austin. We know that states learn best from each other. So we want to open the sluice gates for that to happen. And thank you for your time. That leads us right to the top of the hour. Look for the recording in the next couple of days. Thanks to all.
Thank you very much, particularly to the state folks, Elliot and Linda, Sally, Lauren, and Melody. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day and a great week.